Hello, hey, it's Brendan from WP Speedfix. In this video, I want to talk to you about the best WordPress hosting in Australia. So, I thought I'd make this video because we're based in Australia, so we get a lot of questions about web hosting in Australia and who is the best web host in Australia, and generally get a lot of hosting questions anyway. So, let's talk about this. I'll try and keep the video short but useful. Let's get into this idea of the best web hosting. So you'll see questions all over the web if you Google this. If you Google best web hosting or best WordPress hosting, you'll see all sorts of opinions. One guy says one's the best, someone else says the other's the best. It really depends on what type of business you have and what your expectation is, and I spelled expectation wrong there, and your budget. So for most businesses, traditionally, most businesses choose a web host based on budget or cost, which is a really bad way to do it. There's a lot of cheap hosts on the web. There's a lot of hosts that'll cost you $2 or $5 a month. And that's going to be problematic if you're running a business on that type of host and expecting quality. Essentially, those hosts are like the $2 store or like the low-cost airline. They're cheap for a reason. So the difference between good hosting in terms of cost, and we'll talk about this in a minute, in terms of cost, the difference between cheap hosting and good hosting, or the best, is, I say this all the time, is the difference between the price of a cup of coffee, $2, $4, $5 a month, versus the price of maybe a nice lunch, $50, maybe $100, depending on what type of site you're running. It may be a couple of $100, but the difference is not substantial when you take into account the business running on top of that website. So if your primary criteria for selecting a host is budget or cost, then this video is going to be useful for you. That should probably be the last criteria, or probably one of the least important criteria you use to choose a web host. So let's get into this issue. So for Australian businesses, there's really two hosts we recommend. So first is Cloudways, cloudways.com.au, and the second is wpalpha.com.au. And full disclosure, WP Alpha is one of our brands. And we built that for a number of very specific reasons. Before we built that, well, we built that a long time ago, but before we were mainstream with that brand, we used to recommend Cloudways to everyone. But they're essentially the opposite of each other. So Cloudways it's not even a host. It's basically a platform where you choose a server from a number of different providers. I think 5 providers: Google, Amazon, Linode, Vultr, and DigitalOcean. So you choose a server and then you run their management panel over it. Now, Cloudways is excellent for performance versus price and control. So if you want a lot of raw power and you want a lot of control and you have technical resources and a budget to pay for those technical resources, like a developer who's going to look after the site on an ongoing basis, then Cloudways might be the best host for you. It might not be, but it's worth a look. So it's a very technical host. So if you have technical resources, then it's going to be good for you. WP Alpha is the opposite in terms of it's managed. So everything's taken care of for you, and the price reflects that. So in terms of price versus performance, you get the price performance curve is a little bit different to Cloudways, but you get a lot of management on top of that. It's managed, it's monitored, and it's looked after for you. So that technical piece is taken care of. So it's really important to keep that in mind, that there are technical elements in relation to the hosting that you need to factor in. If you're running commercial enterprise on that hosting, then it's important that there is some budget set aside, or there is something in the budget for tech stuff, developer time, things going on with the website, updates, changes, things like that. So let's get into selection criteria, and this kind of brings me to the next point. So CPU power and memory. So raw performance, like we just talked about, it's important to understand that the raw horsepower of the web host does not equal the site speed. It is not a direct correlation. We talked about this let me bring it up here. I've got the website open. The theory of constraints. We did a mail out a while ago, a couple of weeks ago actually, about this. The theory of constraints. So it's talking about how the output of a system is a combination of the inputs in that system. So certainly the hosting performance, or the raw horsepower on the hosting, so like we talked about there, CPU power and memory, or RAM, is important, but after a certain point, it doesn't make a difference. There are other constraints as well. And I think this might be a better graph to illustrate, or image to illustrate this. So if we talk about SEO and Google rankings, it's not just one thing. The output is dependent on the on-page SEO, the page speed, the amount of traffic you're getting, how good that traffic converts. And that's what the outcome or the leads or the sales the site generates. It's not just one thing. And the same with website performance. So you can have huge amount of raw CPU, huge amount of memory available, but if it's configured poorly or there are other problems with the site, all that means nothing. It's like having a Formula One car. Whoever wins a Formula One race is not determined by the size of the engine. It's a whole bunch of things together. It's the driver, it's the car, it's the team, it's the configuration of the car. The hosting is the same. So the output of the hosting is a number of factors. It is not just raw numbers on a page in terms of performance. So that's CPU and memory. So you're going to need some sort of CPU, some sort of memory. Now, if we look at the kind of categorization of different sites, the different types of sites. So you have just a normal small business website that has maybe 20, maybe 50 pages. It's like a local business, a dentist, a doctor, or something like that. That's really a content site. That's not going to need a lot of CPU power. Something like a WooCommerce site or a membership site that has people checking out, people buying things, adding, removing to cart, things like that, that's going to need a lot more power. So that the load is going to scale up and down with a site like that. It's important that the load caters for, or the performance caters for the peak load, not the average load. So if you have times in the week, day, something like that, if there is a particular point in time where you get a lot of traffic, maybe you're doing a mail out. We had a customer last week, we were talking about, they have an auction site. So the auction, close to when the auction closes, the site is so much more busy and they might have thousands of people on there at once. So the hosting needs to cater for that peak load, not the average load. So keep that in mind. But you're going to need to have some consideration for CPU power and memory. Most hosts will allow you to scale up. So if in doubt, you can start small and scale up, and both Cloudways and WP Alpha will let you do that. Let's talk about location. If you are serving Australian customers, you need to be hosted in Australia. We see a lot of sites, customers come to us with sites that are hosted in the US, and it's like, of course the site is slow. Anytime traffic has to travel across an ocean, expect 1 to 2 seconds of extra load time. Now, you can get around that using Cloudflare or a CDN, but if you're an Australian business focused solely on Australian customers, it doesn't make sense to put that hosting overseas. You should host it in Australia. Secondary to performance considerations there may be some legal considerations too. So depending on what business you're in or industry you're in, the data may actually need to be stored in Australia for privacy considerations or privacy reasons. So that's an important point if you're dealing with government maybe. Keep that in mind. And it's not just where the server is hosted. It is also the company that owns that server, whether they're in Australia or not, and where those backups go. So because if the backups are backing up to some cloud service, they might be backed up overseas or in some location outside Australia. But that's location, so that is a consideration. Doesn't really matter, as long as you're inside Australia, it's not really going to matter which city the site is hosted in, particularly on the East Coast. The site's going to be the same the speed's going to be the same no matter if you're Sydney, Melbourne or Brisbane or Adelaide. It's not going to make much difference. WA is probably not going to make much difference either. Again, we use and recommend Cloudflare Content Delivery Network for all clients, and especially their $5 a month APO service. And the reason why we recommend APO is it means the majority of the site is, and the majority of the time, is hosted by Cloudflare. So Cloudflare is doing the serving, and Cloudflare have locations, I think, in every single capital city in Australia. So make sure you use Cloudflare as well, and we'll talk about that in a minute too. Patching and updates. Somebody has to patch the website. So this has to be done. So you're either going to pay for a developer to do this, or you have software to do this. In both cases, Cloudways and WP Alpha have some form of AI patching and updates where they clone the site, test the updates, do some sort of before and after comparison of the screenshots, check for errors in the test site to make sure everything's okay, and then roll the updates on the live site. The WP Alpha AI is much better than the Cloudways one. The Cloudways one is more simple, but they both do it. WP Alpha is built in, Cloudways it's an extra add-on, but you need some consideration no matter what site. No matter what host, you need some consideration for patching and updates, and you should be using AI in 2025. In today's world, there is no reason why you'd have a developer do that when AI can do it faster, cheaper, better, and more thoroughly than a developer can do it. With most AI patching systems, they can also be run manually, where a human has to provide the input to go ahead. But for most clients we run them in auto mode, and there's rarely an issue. With hundreds of sites we manage, we might have 1 or 2 a year off hundreds of websites, and doing patches nearly every day. Security firewall malware scanning. So this is an important one, and this goes directly relates to performance. So the better the firewall, the better the security, and the better the configuration of that firewall, the faster the hosting is going to be and the less issues you have. There's also a question there, if the site gets hacked, will they fix it for free? Cloudways, I'm not sure. WP Alpha, yes. Cloudflare can filter a lot of crap. So we would typically recommend, if you're only serving an Australian audience, that you filter the traffic outside Australia through Cloudflare's security recapture system. And that way it'll filter a lot of the crap that's hitting the website. So people trying to hack the website, scrapers, crawlers, malicious traffic. And there is an article on our website. If you just search for Cloudflare firewall rules, you'll find it. Some of the things that we do to configure Cloudflare to filter that. So things like blocking brute force attacks. So those Cloudflare rules offload that workload to Cloudflare, and it all basically stops that load on the website. So here we come back again to the configuration of the site is really important in terms of performance. It's not just raw horsepower. If you have a site that has 20 CPUs of horsepower, but if it's getting brute force attacks all day long, aggressive crawlers and scrapers all day long, it's going to use up all those resources. They're pointless. It'll just keep using them till they keep hitting the limit. You could have 100 CPUs and they'd still hit the limit. And that's, again, why configuration is important. Using something like Cloudflare immediately eliminates 99% of that crap. So that's an important consideration. Number of sites you can host. Maybe you have more than one website. That's pretty straightforward. And the cost to host additional sites. Staging sites and the staging capability. Again, if you want to run staging sites. Disk space and storage, especially if you're running staging sites and if you're running AI patching. So the AI patching system usually needs to duplicate the site. So you need double. If the site is 5 gig, you're going to need 10 gig of storage, or maybe even 15 to have some overhead. But just keep that in mind. That's a configuration. Traffic quota. Couple of things here. WP Alpha is unlimited. Cloudways is metered. We would recommend avoiding the direct integration on Cloudways with Cloudflare because it's metered traffic. So I think the base plan only gives you 100 gig of traffic on Cloudflare, which is not a lot for a moderately busy site. So you need to keep that in mind. You don't want to be hitting traffic quotas. And if there is a quota on the host you're using, which some hosts do, you want to make sure you've got some budget allocated for whether you go over that, and some sort of monitoring in place so you're watching that on a monthly basis. Backups, depending on what type of site you have. If you have a WooCommerce site, you might want to back up hourly. Both Cloudways and WP Alpha let you control the backup frequency. WP Alpha you can do hourly if you want. Cloudways, I think you can do hourly. It might be 3 hourly. You need to check that one. But you want to make sure that you understand how the backups work and the frequency of them. So if your expectation is hourly backups and it only backs up once a day, then that's going to be a problem. So some consideration needs to be made there. And with backups, you should always run your own backup system as well and never trust a single backup system. So in IT space, we say 2 is 1 and 1 is none. And the reason for that is because very often, backups will have holes in them. They'll have gaps where this particular time period is not covered, or this scenario is not covered, or in order to restore one file, you need to restore the whole backup, and it takes hours and hours or half a day. So there are different types of backups. So if you have a couple of different backup systems, depending on what you're restoring from, a single file deleted by accident, or an entire site hacked, or a database corrupted, those are very different restores. So you want the ability, these different backup systems back up in different ways, and having the ability to restore in different ways gives you some flexibility in those different scenarios. We typically also recommend using the plugin BlogVault for backup on top of the hosting backup. So that might be something you want to consider. Support. So what's your support expectation? Both hosts have 24-hour support, pretty decent. And, is there enhanced support available? Are there paid support features that you can pay for if you need more detailed support? Or are they just going to handball you away and say, go speak to a web developer? So that's an important consideration there. Price, I put price here because price is important, but it's not the primary criteria. So just keep that in mind. Again, you want to be spending $30-$50 a month on hosting for a small business at the entry point. Maybe you need to spend more, but $2, $5, $10 a month is not enough for a small business hosting platform. You are losing something. You might not see it, but a low price like that indicates that there's something nefarious going on, or not nefarious, but you're probably not getting the quality service that you need to run a business on top of that hosting. Again, like the low-cost airline analogy, like during peak loads, do they shut the website down? Is there a time in the day where the hosting platform's getting hammered and the site just crawls? Like those sort of things happen on a $2 a month host because they're stacking thousands of websites on that same server. And they don't care. They shrug their shoulders and who cares if your site's offline? You're paying $2 a month. It's nothing. Speed optimization. Is there speed optimization service built in? Cloudways, like I said, don't use the Cloudways Cloudflare integration if you can help it. Use your own Cloudflare account. WP Alpha also includes basic speed optimization with onboarding, but that may be a consideration you want to make. Who's doing the migrating? Do you get free migrations? Pretty straightforward, or you're going to have to pay for it. Is email hosting included? You shouldn't host your email with your web host. That's basically our recommendation. They are different services. Email hosting really belongs in the domain of an IT company, so you should have an IT support provider supporting your email if you're a moderately sized business. And there's probably only a couple of choices that make sense in a commercial sense for email hosting. So that would be Google G Suite or Office 365, maybe something like Proton Mail, but you want to use a big cloud service as opposed to use the email hosting that is with your web hosting. It's going to be cheap and not great quality if it's attached to the web hosting. And also you have this issue where if the web hosting goes down, and web hosting always goes down, and we'll talk about that in a second, regardless of an uptime SLA, there will always be a point where your web server is going to have an outage. So I said that what doesn't matter here. Uptime SLAs. Every host is going to say they have 99.99% uptime. They're going to have an extended outage at some point in time. One of the core services on the internet is going to go offline at some point in time. It just happens. And you're going to have to expect downtime. I would say to expect at least one downtime incident a year of 2 to 6 hours. And that's just how it is. If you need better uptime, where downtime like that is completely unacceptable, you're going to have a bigger budget. You're going to have basically fail over hosting. And you're going to have to pay accordingly for that. And that's going to be in the thousands of dollars a month. It is totally doable. But if that is your expectation that there is no downtime, then paying $50 a month is a really big mismatch with the budget versus expectation. So keep that in mind. But my point being is email is a mission critical service. It should be separate to web hosting. If they're with two different companies, if one of them goes down, then the other one will stay up. You don't want everything down at once. So just keep that in mind. So I would strongly recommend keep the email hosting separate to the web hosting. It should be somewhere else. Database caching, whether that's available via Redis or Memcached, good hosts should have some database caching available. What doesn't matter? CDN or Cloudflare integration, run your own Cloudflare account. Don't use the direct integration. Either spend the $5 a month for Cloudflare APO or spend the $25 a month for the full Cloudflare Pro account. It'll give you more flexibility, more control, unlimited traffic. You can configure firewall rules, all that sort of jazz. You have full control over the account. It's much better from a commercial perspective than using the direct integration. Uptime SLAs, we talked about that. They're just worthless. Everyone's going to say they have 99.99%. So if downtime is an issue, if the site is down for half a day and your business is going to burn to the ground because of that, you need to have thought that out in advance and you need to be paying accordingly for that. And this video is probably not the video you should be watching. You should be talking to a developer or an agency or an IT company about that. Things that are non-negotiable: SSL certificates. Every host is providing free SSL certs. You shouldn't be paying for those. And HTTP2 and HTTP3 protocol support. And the reason why I raised this one, both hosts here we recommend have this support, but quite often we still see sites without this support in place. Most often it's where they have a VPS, like a dedicated server configured, and it's configured poorly. But sometimes people are on cheap hosts that don't support this protocol yet. And HTTP2 protocol has been around for 10 years, since 2015. HTTP3 is a bit newer, but the difference between version 1.1 and version 2 of the protocol is basically 100% difference in speed. So it is kind of critical from a speed and SEO perspective and conversion perspective that your host has HTTP2 support. HTTP3 is maybe 10 to 20% faster on top of that. Most of the gains from HTTP3 come from reduced connection time and reduced time to first byte. That's going to be important if you're running paid traffic. So both these protocols are important. HTTP3 is more important if you have paid traffic, but they both make a difference. But you absolutely must have support for these protocols. There are checkers online, so just type in HTTP2 check, HTTP3 check, and you'll find them. And if your host doesn't support it, you either need to log a support ticket and ask them about it, or move host. That's basically that. So that's it for this video. So I've kind of given you a lot of selection criteria there. We'll link you up in the description to various bits and pieces. If you want to head to our website, there are, I'll just go back one more. We do have an article on this. There are some other hosts we typically recommend as well and why we recommend them. And if you have any questions, just post in the description below. If you're looking for help with your website, help with site speed, or help with SEO, we do have a free site speed audit on our website. So go here to our site, wpspeedfix.com. We got a free site audit. There are also free tools, no opt-in required, free SEO audit, free Core Web Vitals report, free WordPress AI speed test. All three of those take about 90 seconds to run. No opt-in, so you don't put an email address in there. We also have a mailing list and also a website valuation tool. So they both need emails. But anyway, I'll leave you to it. I hope you found that useful. Again, let me know if there's anything not clear in the comments. Cheers.